Buongiorno tutti. So today I want to talk about something that's near and dear to all of us, and of course that's the role of food in our culture. As Italian Americans, we know we have some great food traditions that were brought from the old country, and of course we know they've also undergone some evolution and changes in the years since our parents, grandparents, or great grandparents brought them over from Italy. So this is about the food in Italy versus the food in the U.S., or maybe more accurately, we could say how to eat like an Italian. So this comes from a lecture that I gave to the students at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida, last week. It was a great class. It's a great class. The whole class is about food culture. In fact, it's called Italian Culture Through Food. It's taught by one of the graduate students, and it's an upper level course, and it's taught in English, so it's open to all students in the university, not just the students who are on the Italian Studies program. It was interesting, and I enjoyed it because I have some unique experience. I've lived obviously most of my life in the U.S. I was born in the U.S., but I spent many years in Italy as well. So I think I had a unique perspective on this, and the professor asked me to share some of my experience with the class. So who am I? My name's Rick Zullo. I'm an Italian American, of course. This photo was taken of me when I was with the FAU class in Venice for the summer of 2010. I was in Venice for about 6, 7, 8 weeks, I think. And then after that time, I spent a few more months traveling around Italy and really loved it. Fell in love with the country, of course. I'd been there before a couple times on vacation, but it really was a great trip, and it just sort of sold me on the idea that maybe I wanted to live there someday. I didn't wait too long. I got back in August and got my visas in order and moved to Italy in December of 2010. And I've been writing and blogging about Italy ever since. I have a few websites that are devoted to Italian culture, Italian American culture, language, food, travel, you name it. So let's get on with it. Well, if you've seen any of the classic Italian films, you know this one. This is Roberto Sordi. It's called Un Americano Roma. So he's this Italian guy, this Roman guy who wants to be more American. And it's a funny scene because he's trying to eat all this American food, and he's going to drink a glass of milk with his meal. And he tries so hard to be American. And at the end of it, he just can't stand it, at least not the food part of it. So he quickly grabs a plate of pasta and a bottle of wine. And he has this famous scene where he gives up on at least that part of being American. He embraces his Italianness. So it's really funny if you haven't seen it. In fact, my daughter, this is her, and this was totally, the photo itself was unrehearsed, but then of course I saw it and I couldn't help, putting these two images together because she is Italian to her very core. She would eat pasta every day, twice a day if I let her. But so, what I'm going to talk about here then is what I learned when I was in Italy about, Italian cuisine, regional Italian cuisine, because food there is very regional. There is no such thing as Italian food in Italy. Of course, it's all Sicilian food or Roman food or Tuscan food. But even within Tuscany, you have coastal Tuscan food, and you have the Florentine food, and so all the regions are like that. Not only are they regional, but they become very local, sometimes down to the town, where there'll be this this dish that, the recipe will vary from town to town. These towns are like 5 miles, 10 miles apart. So, people are very proud of that. And, there'll even be some variation within the town, from kitchen to kitchen. And, everyone's mom's makes the best version. But, that's just how it is. Very regional. So let's not talk about Italian food. Let's talk about, the regional specialties of Italy. But the Mediterranean diet, so, that's been studied in recent years. Well, it's been studied for a while. In fact, the first guy to name it was this American physiologist, Ansel Keys. He was in Italy during the war, World War II. So during and after, he wound up staying on afterwards. He discovered that people living in this area just south of Naples, a town called Pioppi, they had a very low incidence of cardiac disease. They lived much longer than people in the U.S. of the same demographics. His name, by the way, Ansel Keys, the K in Keys is what is used by the Army for their K rations. So K rations are, what soldiers in the field rely on sometimes when they don't have access to fresh food. They have these K rations, and He's the one who developed that, and they named after him. But he went on to talk about the Mediterranean diet, and he spent his whole life studying it. In fact, he moved on from just Italy to the 7 countries study. So he looked all around the world. Well, yeah, not the whole world, but a good part of the world, including most of Europe, the United States. He didn't go to South America, but he did go to Japan apparently, and he plotted these types of graphs. He collected a lot of data. But then you see my little asterisk at the bottom there. The problem with Keyes was that he purportedly fudged the data. So even though his conclusions were correct, he sort of retrofitted them, the data into the conclusions that he had already made. And while he was right with a lot of his conclusions, he cheated. So people since then have gone on to study it more methodically and correctly, and confirmed what he had found. But another thing that he had found, he was so focused on serum cholesterol and the presence of animal and dairy products in the diet, which increase in animal fat and dairy fat led to an increase in heart disease, whereas an increase in vegetables and vegetable fats were protective against heart disease. But he ignored the problem of the refined sugar, because that's another big difference between the Mediterranean diet and the diet in the U.S. or England or Canada. Is that we have a lot more refined sugar, refined wheats too, but just refined products in general. But the sugar is a big one, and he completely ignored that. So, we'll cut him some slack. It was a while ago. We know better now. So every year, U.S. News and World Report comes out with the best diets in the world, the healthiest diets, I guess, is what they're saying. So, I think this was 7 years in a row now. Mediterranean diet is number one. It's always one or two. Said 7 years in a row. This is January 2023. This comes out. It comes out January every year, and and it's always still there. So you can go to this website if you want, check it out. But there's a lot of great stats there about the diet and the health benefits of the Mediterranean diet. So then there was this book, The Blue Zones, which is co-sponsored by National Geographic, I believe. They found these areas around the world. I don't know how many there were originally, 5 or 6 or 7. I think the next slide talks about that. But they found the areas around the world where the people lived the longest and had the fewest diseases of age, such degenerative diseases such as heart disease, such as dementia, such as diabetes and things like that. So they found these areas around the world that were all over the world, actually. Europe, Central America, Japan. Even in the United States, there's a population that has this in common. So they found these things that they all have in common, and of course, a lot of it was a plant-based diet, a lot of legumes and nuts. Eating beans every day is important. Limiting processed foods and animal products. So let's move on to see where these were. So here they are. Yeah, here's the 5 original ones. One of them is in Italy, in Sardinia. Then there's this one in Icaria, Greece. One in Costa Rica, Japan, and then the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. The thing that a lot of these have in common, so they're sort of all isolated in some way. So in Sardinia, they're isolated by these huge mountain ranges, and so they can't easily travel from place to place. They're kind of stuck in their little village, or maybe a couple villages in the area. And this place in Greece is an island, and this peninsula in Costa Rica is also, isolated. As far as the Seventh-day Adventist, I think they're socially isolated. They choose to sort of live in communities and keep to themselves. So they follow these same patterns. So if you look at these 9 things that they all do, some of them are to do with the diet. So plant-based. The 80% rule means you leave the table when you're 80% full, not when you're 120% full. So that's a big deal. It's a portion control. But there's also social factors such as a sense of belonging, being part of a group. Then there's the exercise, move naturally. So they always emphasize that it's not about going to the gym or running marathons, but you're walking, you're doing gardening, you're carrying groceries, you're doing housework, you're playing with children. These types of activities where your body's moving most of the day, you're not really sitting down much. And so that's really important. It's just the natural movement, not necessarily exercise per se, but just movement. So this was really interesting. Instead of trying to come up with the healthiest diet, based on studying the diet and the food and the components and the molecules and all that in the diet, They simply went to the place where people were already healthy and already living long lives and sort of dissected what they were doing and see how we could incorporate that into our lives, which is difficult, no doubt. But so slow food kind of feeds into all this too, if you'll excuse the pun. This was a movement in the 80s in Italy where they were trying to fight back against fast food. They tried to put a McDonald's near the Spanish Steps in Rome, and people didn't want that, so they pushed back and they started this movement of slow food, where people take their time, they shop for their food, they chop up their food, they make the ingredient, they get all the ingredients, they cook it, they share it with their friends, they sit down for a nice slow meal. It's exact opposite of driving through the McDonald's drive-through and then eating in your car on your way back to work. Um, which is, not only is McDonald's food unhealthy, but just that behavior of just eating on the go and eating at your desk, eating in your car, or eating by yourself even. I mean, it's just been proven that these things are not healthy, even apart from what the food itself is, just the way we eat and who we eat with and how we eat and how fast we eat. So this is part of it, the Mediterranean diet, the blue zones, the slow food, and then this idea of 0 kilometer, which means sourcing your food as close to where you are. So you're eating locally produced food, locally grown food, I should say, sold at the local farmers markets. It's not being trucked in from remote locations or flown in from foreign countries, where it has to be preserved and maybe frozen. And so this is the idea of, being close to, what we call now farm to table as possible. It's not always practical, but still it's something to strive for and something to keep in mind. So yeah, now we'll get down to the discussion of Italian food. And this photo here it's near Piazza Navona in Rome, and everybody takes this photo, but it's about this idea of Italian food. So again, outside of Italy, yes, people talk about Italian food, and usually they're talking about pasta with a tomato sauce and meatballs and pizza. But inside Italy, of course, again, as we said in the beginning, it's very, very regional. And there's a lot of variation between regions, and it's all based on what we said in the last slide about the 0 kilometer, eating what's nearby you. So people who live by the sea eat a lot more seafood than the people who live in the mountains, where they're going to eat a lot more things made from, I don't know, goat's milk, or whatever vegetables they're growing, or things like that. So the Italian paradox, and we all love this quote by Sophia Loren. She has another one that says, "I'd rather eat pasta and drink wine than be a size 0." So, it's about the role of food in your life, and not viewing it as the enemy, something to be avoided or manipulated or something. It's to be enjoyed, but you have to enjoy it judiciously and reasonably, not overindulged. So this Italian paradox, they talked about the French paradox, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years ago, when they found the French people who eat all this rich food, the foie gras and the heavy cheeses and the creams, sauces and the croissants and all that, had a lot less heart disease than people in the U.S. But then they found that this wasn't necessarily true. It was more a function of inaccurate statistics. The people in France had not been eating the unhealthy diet, for as long as the people in the U.S. have. So they're a generation or two behind in developing the heart disease. So nowadays they're pretty much the same as in the U.S. when you talk about that sort of traditional French diet. Now there's certainly parts of France where they're eating the Mediterranean diet. So, but this Italian paradox is, well, if we all think about it, everyone talks about how wonderful the Italian food is, and they eat pasta, and they don't get fat, and they have all these wonderful meats and cheeses and salami and prosciutto, and they don't get fat. Well, again, it's really not such a paradox, because their portion sizes are less. They don't, snack in between meals, and the food is all sort of fresh, local, farm to table kind of stuff. So you can read some of these stats here, and these are a little outdated, but it just, when you look at with the level of health and health care and how much money that we're spending compared to them, it just makes sense that they're just living a healthier lifestyle and they're benefiting from it. So I won't talk too much about this. You guys probably know a lot about this. So the different meals of the day. Prima colazione, of course, is breakfast, and the spuntino is like a mid-morning snack. or just snack in general. Pranzo is lunch. Merenda is like an after-school snack or an afternoon snack. Aperitivo, kind of something like our happy hour, where you'll have one drink. Well, in Italy, it's one drink. In the U.S., maybe it's two for one, and then you have four drinks because you have two. And, then the chain is the dinner, and the cornetto di notte is my thing. I used to always have one of those when I came home late at night. But the courses in the meal, the antipasti, the primo, the secondo, the contorni. Now these are all the courses in the meal, but typically you wouldn't have all these at every meal. My goodness, I mean this is a lot of food. So this is what could be done like at a celebratory meal, at a wedding or a birthday or a Christmas or something like that. So wouldn't eat this every day, but this is the typical Italian courses in the meal. So then again, we're going back to the Italian paradox, and yeah, so is Italian food healthy? Well, it depends again what you're calling Italian food. So pasta, for example, we said Italians eat a lot of pasta, yet they don't get fat. Well, the thing is, they're eating, Italian pasta, not Italian American pasta like we've pictured here in Olive Garden on the right. Spaghetti aglio olio peperoncino. I mean, the name of this dish is also the recipe because that's all that's in it is spaghetti with garlic, oil, and little pepperoncini. Sometimes they have a little what is that parsley in there for color, but that's it. And it's healthy, it's quick and easy to make, and it's delicious. If all these ingredients are fresh, you're using a high quality olive oil and a good pasta too. And that's something else that gets underrated is that the pasta itself should be delicious because you want to taste the pasta. So what you do is you don't drain the pasta like in one of those big strainers. You pull it out with the prendi spaghetti or with a pair of tongs, and you put it in the pan and you finish it with the sauce. Now in this case there's not much in the way of sauce, it's just oil and pepperoncini and a little garlic, but that's how you do it. You don't drain all the water out because you want that water, you want that starchy flavor, and you want the taste of the pasta. And you also just don't drown pasta in sauces. So this thing on the right here, whatever this creamy spinach artichoke glop is, who knows what kind of, I mean, what's the pasta doesn't even need to be there really. I mean, all you're tasting is that heavy cream sauce. So, and when you compare them nutritionally, there's just no comparison. This creamy spinach and artichoke sauce thing, you've got 255% of your daily allowance of saturated fat. So 2.5 times what you need in a whole day in one bowl of pasta. And they offer you an endless bowl of pasta. So people want to get their money's worth, chew down two or three of these bowls, and they got to get a side of Lipitor with that because you're going to go straight to the cardiologist afterwards. I mean, it's just ridiculous how you can turn something healthy like pasta into basically junk food, worse than junk food, and that's what happens when you talk about, is Italian food healthy? Is pasta healthy? Well, again, you got to make sure you know what you're talking about. So Italians have all these rules about eating. Italians don't particularly like rules. It's often said that Italy is a country with a million laws but no rules. So there's some truth to this, but not at the dinner table, because at the dinner table there are plenty of rules and you better follow them. I made some of these up myself. I mean, a lot of these you may have heard of, but I put together 34 of them. There's more than that. Some of them are mine. Some of them are well known. So the first one everybody knows: no cappuccino after 10:30 in the morning. Well, the time isn't so important, but it's just to say that cappuccino's for breakfast. So yeah, you don't really have much breakfast in Italy. You have just a cappuccino usually. Sometimes you take a very simple pastry with it, but most people will skip that really. The first coffee of the day, at 8:30 in the morning or whatever, just a cappuccino. Then later in the day, they'll have another little coffee, probably an espresso this time, with a little pastry or something. But not much breakfast. And coffee or cappuccino, and the cappuccino, I mean, the milk in it is there just to lessen the acidic effect of an empty stomach. So that's it. So it's important to know why the cappuccino is for breakfast and to respect that. So another rule of Italian cooking is, keep it simple. And this is important because, Italians just hate when everything's sort of mixed together and covered with heavy sauce, like we saw in that picture of that pasta. It's why you don't see Mexican food in Italy or even a big city like Rome, because they Italians don't want to see everything mixed together, wrapped up in something, and then covered in a sauce. It's like they have something to hide, and they want to see everything. They want to know what's there. They want to identify it and taste everything too. So a really good fresh tomato is gonna you're still going to taste that even amongst garlic and basil and other ingredients. I mean, because it's a really delicious tomato. Now, some of the tomatoes we get in the U.S. are tasteless, so I mean, you can do whatever you want with them, but you're not going to taste the tomato. So only water or wine with your meal. Yeah, this is another one in Italy. You don't see people drinking soft drinks or orange juice or milk or God forbid coffee or something with their meal. So when you're eating, while you're actually having the meal from start to finish, usually the only thing in Italy is, um, a glass of wine or a glass of water. And it could be fizzy water, it could be still water. Sometimes a beer if it's a lunch, if you're at lunch counter having pizza or panino. But yeah, Coke is not something to be eaten, drank with your meal. Um, so that's just the way they do it. And then there is, speaking of beverages, there's the ice. No ice. Why no ice? Or very little ice, sometimes one cube. They just don't want to water down the drink, and they also don't want to freeze the stomach, and that hinders digestion, or freeze the taste buds for that matter, and then you can't taste the food as well. So ice, I mean, people go to Italy and they're like, "Gosh, they didn't put any ice in my drink." Well, that's on purpose because they think they're doing you a favor. They want you to be able to taste whatever you're drinking, not only the what you're drinking, but also the food. So, you have a ice cold water. You drink your ice water, and your mouth and your taste buds are numb. And now you go to eat, and the taste of the food is diminished. So they're doing you a favor. Eggs for breakfast. No, that's a big no-no in Italy. Only for lunch and even for dinner. Yeah, it's just too much that early in the morning. We are talking earlier about breakfast and cappuccino. So breakfast is extremely light in Italy. Often it's nothing at all other than just the cappuccino. I know, I would say the majority of people in Italy do not have breakfast beyond a cappuccino or something very, very small. So no eggs for breakfast. Pasta must be al dente. This rule is non-negotiable. You can't overcook pasta if that's the cardinal sin. You should actually undercook it by a minute or two and then finish cooking it in the sauce. That way, it's done perfectly when you serve it. And don't ever throw it against the wall. You'll get kicked out of the country. Don't drink alcohol on an empty stomach. Avoid getting drunk. Yeah, being drunk in public is socially unacceptable in Italy. So you have to have a little food. In fact, every time you sit down at a little bar or cafe or something, you order a glass of wine or a beer, they're going to bring you a little bit of food. Sometimes it's just some nuts or olives or tiny little finger sandwiches, or they're going to give you something because they feel like it's never a good idea to drink on an empty stomach. So that's why, and I think that's even a law in Italy, that the bar has to provide you with a little snack if they sell you an alcoholic beverage. Now this is a big one. Italian Americans might push back against, but in Italy, garlic is not used much. It's very much an Italian American thing. In Italy, they'll use the garlic, in the cooking, and they'll with large pieces, they'll pull them out after they serve it or when they serve it, so that you're not eating the garlic. You're just getting the flavor, the taste, the smell of the garlic without consuming the whole, garlic bulb. So, yeah, I have some more of these rules. I mean, you can read them on the website if you want, because like I said, there's 34 of them. But certainly the Parmesan is a big one for the U.S. because they don't in Italy only eggplant is they call it Parmigiano. I mean, they don't even distinguish. I mean, it's just given that it's eggplant, so you don't have to say eggplant Parmesan. It is Parmesan. It's eggplant. There's certainly no chicken, veal, or God forbid shrimp Parmesan. That just doesn't exist. Um, Going back on the history a little bit, so when the Italian immigrants came to the U.S., I guess eggplant was hard to come by. So they used what they could find, which was chicken was pretty cheap. I mean, it wasn't really available back in the old country, but here in the U.S., it was, there's chicken at the butcher shop, but it's probably one of the least expensive things you could buy at the butcher shop. So yeah, let's do that. We can afford it now. And so let's get some more meat in our diet. Um, yeah, don't ever use pineapple and pizza in the same sentence, much less consider putting them on the same plate. This next one, spaghetti and meatballs versus spaghetti with meatballs. So, in Italy, pasta is the first course and the meat is the second course. So you'll see it served that way. You'll have your pasta, and then if you want meatballs, that's the next course after you finish your pasta. They don't come served together. They're not on the same dish, on the same plate. They're actually served in two separate courses. So you finish your pasta, they take the plate away, then they'll bring you your meatballs, it'll be in between. There will be some time too. It's not like they simultaneously take away the empty dish of pasta and put the meatballs in front of you. They want you to take your time and eat, maybe have another sip or two of wine, have some more conversation, and then continue the meal. So stay away from that Parmesan cheese in the shaker glass, the glass shaker thing. Yeah, you don't want that. It's not real cheese. It's just a chemical. So that's that. And as Fellini said, life is a combination of magic and pasta. So yeah, it's about enjoying the food, enjoying the company, taking time to eat, slow down, and that's what makes life worth living. It's not about eating fast or adhering to a specific diet per se. All this stuff with I don't know, what is it, the paleo with the gluten free and all these things. In Italy that doesn't fly. I mean, it's 21st century, so they're certainly aware of these types of fad diets, but they're still going to push back against that and go for the traditional Mediterranean cuisine, and they're better off for it. Getting too hung up on sort of the science of your diet. It's interesting to talk about, interesting to study, but at the end of the day, it's not doing you much good with regards to health. So if you want to continue the discussion, there's some resources I have here personally on some of my websites, Facebook group, Eat Like an Italian. And the other one that I have under there, that one that's got the long number, that's a great one. That's called Italians Mad at Food. So non-Italians will post pictures of their food that they made, their dinner, their pasta dish usually, something like that, and the Italians will rip it apart. And then it gets into a pretty heated discussion. Usually it's good natured. Nobody's really getting mad at each other, but the Italians will call out the non-Italians on how horrible the food is. And then the non-Italians will push back with how horrible their English is. But it's good natured. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this talk about eating like an Italian. And please visit my website, eatlikeanitalian.com, and we can continue the conversation there. Ciao.